Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. In 2022, Florida Power and Light reported net income of $3.7 billion. In 2023, that number grew to $4.5 billion. And in 2024, it raked in yet another $4.5 billion. Now, net income is one of those tricky accounting terms, but it is safe to say that most of that $13 billion FPL brought in the last 3 years, well, that was all profit. Billions and billions of dollars in profit. And yet, in February, FPL proposed the largest rate hike in U.S. history, a rate increase that would add another $10 billion to their bottom line. FPL's proposal was met with widespread condemnation. Some of the largest and most politically powerful business groups in the state came out against it, including companies like Walmart and Wawa, which use a lot of electricity. So what happened next? Well, FPL reached what it called a settlement with those big corporations and trade groups. And to no one's surprise, the settlement protects those big, powerful corporations and does little to help small businesses and their regular customers. Critics say that under this settlement, residential customers could see their electric bills go up 17% over the next 2 years. And let's face it, it's not as if you have a choice of where to get your power from. You can't get it somewhere else. FPL is a state-sanctioned monopoly. Now, when the so-called settlement was announced earlier this month, the president of FPL hailed it in a statement. This settlement agreement is a win for all FPL customers and a win for Florida. It supports our ongoing commitment to meet the resiliency and reliability needs of our fast-growing state while keeping customer bills well below the national average. As you can imagine, FPL's critics scoff at the notion that FPL is looking out for the little guy in their proposals. The AARP in Florida said the proposal would hurt seniors who live on fixed incomes. This settlement leaves residential customers on the hook while corporations get special treatment. The rate hike still needs to be approved by the state's Public Service Commission. This week, I spoke to Bradley Marshall, an attorney for Florida Rising and several other groups who oppose FPL's rate hike.
There are a lot of terms in that settlement, and they would drastically raise rates. And especially as compared to the case FPL originally filed, those rate increases would be disproportionately borne by residential and small business customers. For example, small business customers specifically are facing more than triple the rate increase that FPL had originally proposed. And so FPL is going around saying that they've reduced their request as part of the settlement they reached with a lot of their corporate customers, but the most benefits of that reduction are going to those corporate customers that agreed to the settlement, leaving residential customers and small business customers to pay for this, what we still think is a golden deal for Florida Power and Light and for their corporate customers in the form of a vastly reduced rate increase and in the form of higher credits to be interruptible customers.
So obviously, when we're talking about the different customers, there are different categories. You seem to be referring to some of their larger corporate clients, such as I understand it, Publix, Wawa. What are some of the other corporations that they seem to have structured a deal with that is favorable to them at the expense of consumers? Who are some of the other corporations?
So you mentioned some of them. Walmart would be another one. They're a party that specifically intervened in the case and have signed off on the settlement with Florida Power and Light Company. But most of them hide behind these amorphous groups that you really can't tell who's behind them, like the Florida Industrial Power Users Group, for example. We've been trying to find out who's behind that group, and we just found that they're going to move to quash our discovery to try to find out who's behind them.
So is it literally that some of those other corporations, the bigger corporations, will have a different rate schedule than the average consumer will, or small business will?
Absolutely, and that's actually, and I'll defend that as an idea. It does cost different amounts to serve your average residential customer versus for example, your big factory. And so to some extent, it makes sense to charge those customers different rates for energy or demand or to be a customer of Florida Power and Light. And we have actually what's called cost of service, which is various methodologies to assign costs to those different customer classes. And one of the things Florida Power and Light did when they originally filed their case was file all these cost of service studies to justify the different costs assigned to the different customer classes. What happened when FPL made this deal with some of their largest corporate customers is they threw all of that out and said, we're just going to ignore that and give this enormous reduction from what was proposed to our corporate customers and this enormous increase from what was proposed to small business customers. And that's what doesn't make any sense and is completely unfair.
Not just small business customers, but also folks in their homes, residential users, correct?
So also residential customers who are getting a slight reduction from what was originally proposed by FPL, but not nearly the reduction they should be given the new overall rate increase that Florida Power and Light is asking for.
Am I correct in saying that this is the largest rate hike in U.S. history? For any
We
utility?
believe so. We've been searching to try to find a bigger one, and we have not. We believe this is the largest rate hike in U.S. history.
All right. Now, ultimately, this has to be approved by the Public Service Commission. That's the utility regulator for the state of Florida that oversees this. That is a position to be a member of the PSC. You're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate. When do we know? When will the Public Service Commission be convening to make its decision? Will they be holding testimony? Will they be holding hearings? What is the status of that as this process is moving forward?
Currently, it's been scheduled for a 2-week hearing in October, following which all the parties are expected and scheduled to have the opportunity to brief their positions and their arguments based on what happens at the hearing. And then sometime after that, probably towards the end of November, we expect. I don't think we have an exact schedule yet. We would expect the Public Service Commission to make a decision on Florida Power and Light's proposed settlement.
The Office of Public Counsel has filed its own action in this case. Can you explain to me what the OPC, the Office of Public Counsel, is and what they are attempting to do?
Yes. So Florida, the legislature established the Office of Public Counsel to represent the citizens of the state of Florida in utility rate-making proceedings. And so they are charged with representing basically all of Florida Power and Light's customers and trying to ensure a fair, just, and reasonable outcome. And what's happened is they have filed a settlement with our clients, Florida Rising, LULAC, and EcoSwift, that we think is very generous to Florida Power and Light, gives them the highest return on equity of any utility in the lower 48 states, but also drastically reduces their rate increase request and treats all customer classes fairly using the cost of service methodology, a compromise cost of service methodology that actually assigns the costs each class is responsible to those classes. And so as a result, the rate increase proposed for residential customers and small business customers under the settlement we reached with the Office of Public Counsel is a lot smaller than that in FPL's proposed settlement.
So in the settlement that OPC is proposing, they still grant that major corporations, because of their usage, because of the costs associated with them, do receive some benefit that's better than the average consumer, but just not to the extent that FPL was trying to achieve. Is that a fair way to say it?
That's completely correct.
And you know, when you say that the Office of Public Counsel has made a proposal, do they have much power in the way of being able to actually move something forward, or are they just simply a group that will be heard as part of the Public Service Commission hearings in a few weeks in October when this is all taken up?
We hope that the Public Service Commission will give the settlement that we reached with the Office of Public Counsel equal rate and consideration as the settlement that FPL reached. We believe that when weighed against each other, it's clear that the one we reached is actually in the public interest and results in fair, just, and reasonable and non-discriminatory rates, which is also a requirement under Florida law. And we just don't think FPL settlement does that. And so since the Office of Public Counsel is charged by Florida law with representing the citizens of the state, we certainly hope that the Public Service Commission will give that a lot of weight.
Typically, it seems like the consumer or small business owners don't have a lot of political clout, certainly not the same political clout that some of these major corporations that we're talking about, whether it's Walmart, whether it's these industry groups, whether it's Publix, would have. But there does seem to be one group that does have some political clout in Florida that my understanding is they're upset by this FPL settlement, and that's the AARP, because they know what the impact of these rate hikes will have on seniors who are on fixed income. I know you don't represent them, but can you talk a little bit about that? Am I correct in saying that the AARP is opposing this?
Yes, you're absolutely right. I don't speak for the AARP, but they have come out with very strong statements against the settlement that FPL reached with those special interest large corporate customers of theirs. And AARP has been a tremendous advocate for residential customers and arguing that these massive rate increases, this one specifically, should be denied.
We'll have more on this in the weeks ahead, you can be sure. Now, when we come back, Alligator Alcatraz is getting shut down. Was this a $240 million taxpayer-funded boondoggle? We'll talk to Congressman Jared Moskowitz when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back. After a federal judge found the state and federal government may have violated environmental laws by building Alligator Alcatraz in the middle of protected wetlands, she ordered it to be shut down. It will be remembered not just for its cruelty, but also for its cost to taxpayers, a $240 million marketing stunt. Joining me now to discuss that, as well as some of the big news surrounding FEMA, is Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz. Congressman, I'm curious as to your reaction to what appears to be the closing of Alligator Alcatraz.
Good. I'm glad it's closed. It was a bad idea. It should never have been open. I'd been to the facility. Quite frankly, it was not a good use of taxpayer dollars. It was done on purpose to put it in the middle of the Everglades, and there were other ways that they could have done it. So I agree with the judge's order. I'm glad it's closed. Whether it's a good use of taxpayer dollars will have to be determined by other folks that will look at it. I think maybe James Corman Oversight could look at that since it's going to be federally reimbursed. He has jurisdiction rather than some of the other nonsense that he's doing.
Do we have an idea of exactly how much taxpayer money has been spent on this facility? I've seen estimates of upwards of $240 million.
So that's based on the POs that are public information. As you know, as being the former director of emergency management, I know how the system works. You have to publish the purchase orders that you sign. Those are the caps on the contract. So what's unclear is how much a vendor has billed towards the cap. So that number published is really the ceiling. It could be less. We'll know that when they eventually send in all of their invoices, then they will adjust those PO numbers down to the actual billing number. But look, yeah, it could cost, to the top of about $240 million for the 2 months that they were operating.
At the end, as we look back on this, do you see it as basically just a stunt by both the governor and the federal government? The appeal, the cruelty of being able to refer to something as Alligator Alcatraz, have the president come in, talk about, the best guards are the alligators. It just seemed like it was more play acting than it was real policy driven.
Jim, of course it was performative. I mean, you think parading the National Guard in D.C., having them pick up trash isn't performative? I mean, this is what politics is now. It is all performative, and we'll use government money to do the performance. And so, this is what it is. This is what the American people get from their politicians now. It's performance. It's all performance. Obviously, when they figured out the name Alligator Alcatraz, Donald Trump, being the marketing guy he is, loved it, ran with it, and got DHS to actually use federal funding that they had frozen for New York and then shifted over to this operation. And so, no doubt, Jim, that a lot of what we see today, including this, is all performance.
But that raises a good point. You talk about federal funding. The state, as I understand it, the state has put the money up front with the hope that the federal government will reimburse them. Do we know if the federal government has begun that reimbursement process at all, or is the quote unquote check in the mail, so to speak?
So that's how all FEMA grants work, right? States, local governments, counties, right? They all have to put the money up front, and then they apply for reimbursement. There used to be something called expedited reimbursement, where you would get like 25% of the money up front, but Kristi Noem has gotten rid of that. That's going to be a huge problem when it comes into hurricane season, especially for fiscally constrained areas. But I don't know if the state has gotten any of the reimbursement money. That's, something that you would have to ask the Division of Emergency Management. Hopefully they do. Now, because it's closed, it's going to cost less than DHS had in that fund. In addition, in the big, beautiful bill, which I voted against, they put $150 billion in there for ICE. So there's definitely money that's available to reimburse the state of Florida. Hopefully they get their money back.
You mentioned FEMA a second ago, and that was really the other reason I wanted to talk to you, because there's been a lot of news lately in terms of FEMA employees signing an open letter to members of Congress, such as yourself, asking for greater oversight, asking for more involvement, because there's a real fear within the FEMA management that they are not ready for hurricane season and may face real Katrina-like situations. And as a result of that letter, I know a number of them have been suspended from their duties. What is your reaction to the letter, and what did you think in terms of those suspensions?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of upsetting things, obviously, that have happened in the, almost 9 months of the administration. But this one has gone under the radar. And probably of all the agencies that have been touched, this one is in the worst shape. Worse than Department of Education, worse than anything they've done to Social Security. It has absolutely been decimated. Look, I've said it before, FEMA needed reform, right? Past FEMA administrators have known FEMA has needed reform. One of those reforms is to get FEMA out of Homeland. It is being strangled there, being used to do all sorts of grants that have nothing to do with emergency management, losing their focus. They can't make decisions. They're being slowed down. They're in a giant bureaucracy of 23 organizations. It's why I have a bipartisan bill with Byron Donalds to actually get FEMA out of Homeland, something that's supported by, Democrat and Republican former FEMA administrators. But that's not what Kristi Noem has done. She did not do FEMA reform. She did not make FEMA faster. She did not get rid of the bureaucracy. She went the opposite direction, which is totally different than what Donald Trump told her to do, which was to make it faster, right? She has made it more inefficient. First of all, she got rid of 20% of the workforce. She got rid of a lot of people with a lot of expertise. The regional offices, the regional FEMA administrative offices, where a lot of the work gets done, a lot of the coordination happens with state directors. Those offices are 20, 30% empty. We've had a lot of regional administrators leave. We have interims in those positions. Okay, and anything over $100,000 has to come to Kristi Noem. That's bureaucracy. That's not speeding up. And if we look, how did it work in Texas? How did her system work in Texas? She didn't approve swiftwater rescue crews for 72 hours. Usually, Jim, the way that would work is the regional administrator would put those crews on the road. In Texas's instance, they would have moved them from the Omaha district or from the New Orleans district because those are faster. In Florida, we have Task Force 1, Task Force 2. They're out of Miami, City of Miami and Miami-Dade County. They receive federal funds. We would have moved them within hours of that. In this instance, she didn't even move them for 3 days. So if she didn't move them for 3 days, they didn't get there really until day 3.5 or day 4. What are they doing at that point? They're not saving anybody. That's a recovery mission at that point. And that's bureaucracy. That's slower than any other response. And so that's why these people are raising the alarm. I'm thankful that they have, but Jim, it's real easy to destroy something. It's much harder to rebuild it. And I got to be honest, I don't think the White House knew what Kristi Noem was doing. I think they found out in Texas, and now they got a big problem. But I don't think they knew the damage that she really caused over there.
You said something at the outset that I just want to go back and drill down on. Any expenditure of more than $100,000, she has to personally sign off on?
That's correct. Anything over 100,000, she has to personally sign off. Why does she need to know that? And why 100,000? Like, do you understand how much is now being filtered up to the top? It's impossible for one person to manage that, to approve everything. This is centralized power, and that's why the agency is slowed down. That's why they can't respond. They can't make decisions. That's why it took 3 days to get swiftwater rescue crews moving. And so, no. And by the way, the director of that program of the swiftwater rescue crews, the Urban Search Task Force, resigned after Texas because they couldn't help. These people are in there to help. FEMA has to work in Americans' greatest time of need. You know, these disasters hit Republicans, Democrats. These are nonpartisan places. I'm not saying they haven't made mistakes, that there aren't individuals there that haven't made mistakes in the past. But the agency itself wants to come in and help. The idea that they're being sidelined. And look, these states are not ready, Jim. Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, South Carolina, North Carolina, they get a big event. They're not ready. They get a Cat 4. They're not ready. California has another Northridge, right? No one there has experience with that anymore. It's a long time ago. They're not ready. We get a big event outside of Texas and Florida, okay? These states are going to need FEMA, and FEMA is not going to be there.
I want to change gears for a second and talk about something that we're seeing across the country. We just saw Texas do a redistricting plan to try to wipe out 5 Democratic seats there. Indiana is being pressured to do the same. Ohio, other states are facing it. California now in response is trying to do their redistricting plan to voters to try to take out some Republican seats. And of course, Governor DeSantis is pushing for a plan here in Florida that would go after various districts, including your own. I realize there isn't a lot of substance yet in terms of there haven't been any proposed maps or any proposed changes, but just on a bigger level, how concerned are you by what you're hearing and seeing in Florida now as it comes to potentially redistricting, and do you feel imperiled?
Well, look, this isn't about me. What's happening in the country in gerrymandering and redistricting in general, this is bad for the American people, and it's bad for Congress. Congress is not going to be able to function. You think it's bad now. Okay, 5 more seats in Texas, if it's 5 seats in California, and they have no choice but to respond, this is the game that has been thrust upon them. If it's 2 in Ohio, 1 in Indiana, 1 in Missouri, and if it's 2 or 3 here, okay, then you're getting rid of these seats that matter in the general elections. Then we're back to more seats that only matter in the primary, people that won't compromise, people that won't pass bills, more performative politics, and more power than going to the executive. This is terrible for the American people. If their policies, by the way, were so popular right now, the big, beautiful bill was so popular and they could win with the current map, they wouldn't be need to do this. So they wouldn't be need to cheating to start, redistricting these seats right before the election. As far as Florida is concerned, I'm not commenting because, we also have to be careful about what we say. There will obviously be lawsuits that will wind up being filed. But in Florida, we have fair districts. This is in the Constitution. It specifically bars political gerrymandering. And so we'll have to see what they decide to do. Remember, these are their maps, Jim. They drew these maps. These aren't Democratic maps. Democrats haven't drawn maps in Florida in 40 years. These are Republican maps. They drew these themselves. They drew them as Republican as they can make them. My district, which used to vote for Joe Biden by 13, and Ted Deutsch won his reelection by 15 or 16, they redrew this district, and now I win by 5. So this has become a very Republican district after they drew it. And so, this idea that these are somehow woke maps or anything like that is just nonsense. These are their maps. So I don't know why all of a sudden there are problems.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. Oh, how I do enjoy hearing from you, good and bad. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.